My daughter-in-law looked at my work boots and told her guests I was the building superintendent. She said I had come to fix the kitchen sink. She did not know I owned the entire building. I did not correct her. I did not raise my voice. I simply finished my coffee, kissed my granddaughter on the forehead, and walked out. 48 hours later, my son was unemployed. His wife was served divorce papers by her own family, and I was standing in a courtroom holding my granddaughter's hand. Before I tell you how I dismantled their perfect life brick by brick, please hit like and subscribe if you have ever been underestimated by the people who owe you everything. It was a Saturday morning in late October, the kind of morning where Boston looks like it was painted by someone who loved the color gold. The maple trees along Commonwealth Avenue were on fire with autumn light. I was driving my 2003 Chevy Silverado through Back Bay, which is not a neighborhood that welcomes old trucks. The brownstones here cost more than some people make in a lifetime. I knew that because I had built 6 of them. My name is not important. What is important is that I am 67 years old. I have 2 arthritic knees, hands that look like they were carved from oak, and a granddaughter named Sophie who just turned 7. Sophie was the reason I was driving through Back Bay at 8 in the morning with a stuffed elephant wrapped in newspaper on the passenger seat. It was her birthday. I had not been invited to the party, but I came anyway, because a grandfather does not need an invitation to love his grandchild. I pulled up to the brownstone at 118 Marlborough Street. It was a 5-story federal-style building with black iron railings and window boxes full of ornamental kale, the kind of place that whispers old money even when the people inside have none. There were balloons tied to the front railing, pink and gold. A banner hung above the door that read Sophie's Enchanted Garden in calligraphy that probably cost $200. I parked the truck behind a white Tesla. The truck coughed twice before the engine died. I grabbed the elephant and tucked it under my arm. I was wearing what I always wear: a flannel shirt, Carhartt jacket, steel-toed boots, and a Red Sox cap that has survived more winters than most marriages. I walked up the stone steps and rang the bell. The door opened. My daughter-in-law, Rebecca, stood in the frame. She was wearing a cream-colored cashmere sweater and white pants. Her hair was blown out. Her lips were painted the exact shade of disapproval. She looked at me, the way a hotel manager looks at someone who wandered in from the street. Walter. She did not say my name like a greeting. She said it like a diagnosis. "What are you doing here?" I held up the elephant. "Happy birthday to Sophie. I just wanted to drop this off and give her a hug." Rebecca glanced over her shoulder. I could hear the noise of the party inside, children laughing, parents chatting, the tinkling of a piano. She stepped forward, narrowing the doorway with her body. "We talked about this, Walter. Today is not a good day. I have the Parkinsons here, the Delacroix, Marcus's managing partner and his wife. This is a networking event disguised as a birthday party, and I cannot have you walking around in that jacket telling stories about pouring concrete in the 70s. I felt the familiar tightening in my chest. Not from heart trouble, from the effort of swallowing words that wanted to come out sharp. "I am not here to network, Rebecca. I am here to see my granddaughter." She sighed. She actually sighed at me like I was an inconvenience. Like the old man who built this city's skyline with his bare hands was a scheduling conflict. "Fine. 5 minutes. Go through the kitchen entrance. Do not talk to the guests. I will bring Sophie to you in the back." The kitchen entrance. Like a delivery man. Like the help. I nodded. I walked down the steps and around to the side alley. I let myself in through the service door. The kitchen was enormous and spotless. A caterer was arranging miniature cupcakes on a marble slab. She glanced at me and then looked away, assuming I was maintenance. I stood by the refrigerator and waited. Through the swinging door, I could hear the party. I heard Rebecca's voice rise above the crowd. She was talking to someone. "Oh, that? No, that is just our building superintendent. He is here to check the water pressure. Old building, you know. Always something breaking." She laughed. The other woman laughed. They laughed at me while I stood in the kitchen holding a $7 stuffed elephant for a little girl who deserved better than all of them combined. The door swung open. Sophie ran in. She was wearing a pink tutu and a crown made of paper flowers. She looked like a tiny queen. Her face split into the biggest smile I have ever seen. "Grandpa Walt, She crashed into my legs and squeezed. I knelt down, ignoring the pain in my knees, and I held her. She smelled like birthday cake and crayons. She smelled like everything good in the world. I brought you something, sweetheart. She tore the newspaper, wrapping off the elephant. Her eyes went wide. She hugged it to her chest. He is perfect, Grandpa. I am going to name him Peanut. I laughed. It was the first real laugh I had felt in weeks. Then I heard footsteps. My son, Marcus, appeared in the kitchen doorway. He was wearing a navy blazer and a pocket square. He looked like a man who had read an article about what successful people wear and followed it to the letter. Dad, you cannot be here right now. Rebecca is going to lose it. I am leaving, Marcus. I just wanted to see the girl. He ran his hand through his hair. He looked nervous. He always looked nervous around Rebecca, like a dog that has been trained with a rolled newspaper. Look, Dad, I appreciate the gesture, but this is not the time. These people are important to my career. If Hargrove sees you here, he is going to think. Think what, Marcus? That your father is a working man? That the man who paid for your college and your law school and your bar exam prep course wears boots instead of loafers? Marcus looked at the floor. He could not meet my eyes. He never could when the truth was in the room. Just go, Dad. I will call you next week. We will get lunch. I had heard that promise before. Last month it was lunch. The month before it was a Sunday visit. The month before that it was a phone call that never came. I kissed Sophie one more time. I stood up. My knees cracked like pistol shots in the quiet kitchen. Goodbye, Marcus. I walked out the service door. The October air hit my face. It was cold and honest. I preferred it to the warmth inside. I climbed into my truck. I sat there for a long time. I looked at the brownstone. I looked at the balloons. I looked at the building that my son believed he owned. He did not own it. I did. I owned that building and the two buildings next to it. I owned them through a holding company called Granite Peak Properties, LLC, which was registered to a man named Walter James Connolly. Me, the same man who had just been sent through the kitchen like a plumber. I started the engine. The truck rattled to life. I was not going home. I was going to my office. And for the first time in 5 years, I was going to stop pretending to be invisible. Most people in Boston real estate know the name Granite Peak. They do not know my face. That was by design. I built my first apartment building when I was 29. I built it with my own hands, my own money, and the help of 6 guys I met at a union hall. By the time I was 50, I owned 43 properties across Boston, Cambridge, and Somerville. By the time I was 60, I had a portfolio worth $380 million. But I never changed. I never bought a mansion. I never hired a driver. I lived in the same triple-decker in Southie that I bought in 1989. I drove the same truck. I wore the same boots. My wife, God rest her soul, used to say I was the richest man who still clipped coupons. She was right. When Catherine died 8 years ago, something broke inside me. Not my will, my desire to be seen. I stopped going to industry events. I stopped taking meetings in person. I let my property managers handle the day-to-day operations. I became a ghost in my own empire. Marcus never understood what I did. He knew I was in construction. He knew I owned some buildings. He did not know how many. He did not know the scale. And when Rebecca came along, with her Beacon Hill ambitions and her designer opinions, she decided that my work boots were an embarrassment. She reframed my life story as something to hide. I let it happen. That was my mistake. I let her push me to the margins because I thought keeping the peace would keep the family together. I thought if I stayed quiet, stayed small, stayed out of sight, Marcus would eventually grow a spine. He never did. I drove to my office. It was not in a glass tower. It was on the 3rd floor of a converted warehouse in the Seaport District. The building was mine, of course. The office was sparse. A steel desk, 3 monitors, a filing cabinet, and a photo of Catherine holding baby Marcus. That photo was 38 years old. The baby in it had grown into a man I did not recognize. I sat down. I opened my laptop. I logged into the property management portal for 118 Marlborough Street. I pulled up the lease agreement. There it was. Tenant, Marcus W. Connolly. Monthly rent, $1. Lease type, month to month at landlord's discretion. I had given him this lease when he graduated law school. I told him it was temporary. That was 5 years ago. I also pulled up the financial records. Every month, I deposited $6,000 into a joint account I had set up for Marcus and Rebecca. I called it a family support fund. It was meant to cover Sophie's school tuition, her medical expenses, her extracurriculars. I had been doing this since she was born. I looked at the withdrawal history. Something was wrong. The tuition payments to Sophie's school were irregular. Some months they were short. Other months they were missing entirely. But the account was always drained to zero by the end of each cycle. Where was the money going? I picked up the phone and called Frank DeLuca. Frank was a private investigator I had used twice before, once for a tenant dispute and once for an insurance fraud case. He was expensive, thorough, and completely without sentiment. Frank, I need you to look into my son's finances, and I need you to check on my granddaughter's school situation. Something does not add up. Frank did not ask why. He never did. He just said, give me 72 hours. Those 72 hours were the longest of my life. On Tuesday evening, Frank walked into my office carrying a leather messenger bag. He sat down across from me and unzipped it slowly. He pulled out a folder that was at least an inch thick. Walter, he said, you are not going to like this. I have not liked anything since Saturday. Just tell me. He opened the folder. He spread the documents across my desk like a surgeon laying out instruments before an operation. The Family Support Fund, $6,000 a month. Rebecca controls the account. She has been diverting approximately $4,000 a month into a personal brokerage account under her maiden name. She told Marcus it goes to Sophie's school. I stared at the numbers. $4,000 a month for 5 years. That was nearly $250,000. It gets worse, Frank said. Sophie is not enrolled at the Brookline Academy. She has never been enrolled there. Rebecca sends you the newsletters and the report cards, but they are fabricated. I checked with the school directly. They have no record of a Sophie Connolly. My throat went dry. Where is she going to school? She is at the local public elementary. It is a decent school, but it is not what you are paying for. And according to attendance records, Sophie has missed 31 days this semester. 31 days, Walter. The school sent 3 letters home. None of them were answered. I felt the room narrow. 31 days. My granddaughter had missed 31 days of school while her mother was stealing tuition money and her father was too afraid to ask questions. What else? I said. My voice was barely a whisper. Frank hesitated. He pulled out a second set of documents. Marcus's law firm, Hargrove and Associates. I did some digging. He was placed on administrative leave 6 weeks ago. His managing partner discovered irregularities in his client trust account. Approximately $90,000 in client funds were moved to a personal account. Marcus claims it was an accounting error. The Bar Association has opened an investigation. My son was stealing from his clients. He is not just stealing from clients, Frank continued. He is borrowing from loan sharks. I found records of 3 separate high-interest personal loans totaling $140,000. 2 of them are past due. The lender is not a bank, Walter. It is a man named Vincent Caruso who operates out of Revere. I knew the name. Everyone in Boston construction knew that name. Caruso was the kind of man who collected debts with a baseball bat. Is Sophie safe? That was all I cared about. Frank pulled out the last section of the folder. He placed 3 photographs on the desk. They showed Sophie being dropped off at school by a woman I did not recognize. The woman was smoking a cigarette. She was looking at her phone. She was not holding Sophie's hand. Rebecca hired a babysitter off a neighborhood app, Frank explained. No background check, no references. This woman, her name is Donna Grillo, has 2 prior arrests. One for petty theft, one for driving under the influence with a minor in the car. I could not breathe. My granddaughter was being left with a stranger who had a criminal record while her mother stole money and her father spiraled into and they had the nerve to send me through the kitchen door. I closed the folder. I pressed my palms flat on the desk. The steel was cold against my skin. I needed the cold. I needed something solid to keep me from breaking. I picked up the phone. I called Arthur Chen. Arthur was not just a lawyer. He was a legal weapon. He handled my corporate affairs, my trusts, my estate planning. He charged $800 an hour, and he was worth every cent. Arthur, I need 3 things by Friday. 1. A termination notice for the lease at 118 Marlborough. 2. An emergency petition for temporary custody of my granddaughter Sophie. 3. A report filed with the Massachusetts Board of Bar Overseers regarding Marcus Connolly's trust account violations. Arthur was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Walter, are you certain about this? Once we file the custody petition, there is no quiet resolution. This becomes a public matter. I looked at the photo of Sophie being dropped off by a woman with a cigarette and a criminal record. Arthur, my granddaughter missed 31 days of school. Her mother is embezzling her tuition money. Her father is borrowing from loan sharks. They are letting a convicted criminal babysit her. I am not looking for a quiet resolution. I am looking for justice. Understood. I will have everything ready. I hung up the phone. The office was silent. The harbor lights reflected off the ceiling in slow-moving patterns. I stood up and walked to the window. The city I had helped build stretched out before me. Somewhere out there, in a brownstone I owned, my granddaughter was probably getting ready for bed. I wondered if anyone was reading her a story. I wondered if anyone was checking that her teeth were brushed. I pressed my forehead against the cold glass. I made a promise to Catherine. I whispered it to the empty room. I will get her out. Whatever it costs. Whatever it breaks, I will get her out. Friday came with a nor'easter. The wind was howling off the harbor hard enough to rattle the windows of my warehouse office. The sky was the color of gunmetal. It was the perfect weather for what I was about to do. Arthur Chen arrived at 9 in the morning with a paralegal and 2 leather binders. Frank DeLuca arrived at 9:15 with a USB drive containing every piece of evidence we had. At 9:30, a process server named Tommy Nolan showed up. Tommy was a retired firefighter who looked like he could bench press a Buick. He was perfect for the job. I laid out the plan. It was surgical. It was merciless. Step 1. Tommy would serve the lease termination notice at 118 Marlborough. Marcus and Rebecca had 72 hours to vacate. The brownstone was mine. Always had been. The $1 lease contained a clause that allowed immediate termination for conduct detrimental to the owner or the property. Embezzlement, fraud, and child neglect qualified. Step 2. Arthur would file the emergency custody petition with the Suffolk County Probate Court. The evidence was overwhelming. The fabricated school records, the diverted funds, the criminal babysitter, the missed school days. No judge in Massachusetts would look at this file and leave Sophie in that house. Step 3. I would personally deliver a copy of Frank's financial report to the Board of Bar Overseers. Marcus's career as a lawyer was over. He just did not know it yet. We moved out at 10. Tommy reached the brownstone first. He rang the front doorbell. Rebecca answered. She was in yoga pants and a cashmere robe. She looked annoyed. Can I help you? Tommy handed her the envelope. You have been served, ma'am. Lease termination effective immediately. You have 72 hours to vacate the premises. Rebecca looked at the papers. Her face went through several colors. White, then red, then a shade of purple I had never seen on a human being. This is a mistake, she stammered. My husband owns this building. Tommy shook his head. No, ma'am. The building is owned by Granite Peak Properties, LLC. Your husband is a month-to-month tenant. The owner has exercised his right to terminate. Who is the owner? She demanded. Tommy looked at the name on the document. A Mr. Walter James Connolly. The color drained from her face entirely. She looked like she had been slapped by a ghost. I was sitting in my truck across the street. I watched her through the windshield. I watched the moment the truth hit her. The building superintendent. The man she sent through the kitchen. The man she called a plumber in front of her fancy friends. He owned the roof over her head. He owned the ground under her feet. And he had just pulled it all away. She fumbled for her phone. She was calling Marcus. I could see her mouth moving. I could imagine the words. Your father. The building. Eviction. My phone rang 12 minutes later. It was Marcus. Dad, what is going on? Rebecca says someone served us an eviction notice. She says the building is in your name. That cannot be right. You own a few apartment buildings in Southie. You do not own property in Back Bay. I own 43 properties, Marcus. including the one you have been living in rent-free for 5 years while your wife stole your daughter's tuition money and you stole from your own clients. The silence on the line was deafening. Dad, I can explain. You cannot, I said. But you will have the chance to try in front of a judge. Arthur Chen filed an emergency custody petition for Sophie this morning. The hearing is Monday. Marcus made a sound I had never heard from him before. It was not a word. It was the sound of a man whose entire fabricated identity was collapsing in real time. You cannot take my daughter, he whispered. I am not taking her, Marcus. I am saving her. She has missed 31 days of school. You are letting a woman with a DUI conviction watch her while Rebecca spends the tuition money on a personal stock portfolio. You are borrowing money from Vincent Caruso to cover debts you created by stealing from your clients. You are not a father right now, Marcus. You are a liability. He started to cry. Deep, heaving sobs that came through the phone like static. I listened. I did not comfort him. Comfort was what had gotten us here. I hung up. The hearing was on Monday morning. The courtroom was small and cold. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The judge was a woman named Margaret Okafor. She had gray hair, kind eyes, and a reputation for protecting children above all else. Marcus sat at the respondent's table with a public defender. He could not afford a private attorney anymore. Hargrove and Associates had terminated him the day after I filed the bar complaint. Rebecca sat behind him in the gallery. She was not sitting next to him. She was sitting 3 seats away. They had not spoken since the eviction notice. Arthur Chen presented the evidence methodically. The fabricated school enrollment, the diverted funds, the attendance records showing 31 absences, the background check on the babysitter, the loan shark debts, the client trust account violations. Each piece of evidence landed like a hammer blow. The judge's face grew harder with each document. Marcus's public defender tried to argue that the family was going through financial stress and that the situation was temporary. Judge Okafor looked at him over her reading glasses. Temporary? She said. This child has been failed systematically for years. This is not a rough patch. This is a pattern of neglect and fraud. She turned to Marcus. Mr. Connolly, I have reviewed the petition and the supporting evidence. I am granting temporary emergency custody of Sophie Connolly to her grandfather, Walter James Connolly, effective immediately. You will have supervised visitation rights pending a full custody hearing in 60 days. Marcus stood up. Your Honor, please. She is my daughter. I love her. The judge looked at him with something between pity and steel. Then prove it, Mr. Connolly. Get your affairs in order. Get sober. Get honest. In 60 days, I want to see a man who deserves to be a father. Right now, I do not see one. The gavel came down. The sound was final. Rebecca stood up. She did not look at Marcus. She walked out of the courtroom without a word. I learned later that she filed for divorce that afternoon. She moved back to her parents' house in Connecticut. She did not ask for custody. She did not ask about Sophie. She disappeared from her daughter's life as cleanly as if she had never been in it. Marcus found me in the hallway after the hearing. He looked 10 years older than he had the week before. His eyes were red. His blazer was wrinkled. The pocket square was gone. Dad, he said. His voice cracked. I did not know what to say to him. So I said the truth. You have 60 days, Marcus. Not to get your money back. Not to get your career back. To get your soul back. I will not help you with a single dollar. I will not pay your debts. I will not fix your bar complaint. You dug this hole by yourself, and you will climb out of it by yourself, or you will stay at the bottom. But I will be watching. And if you do the work, if you earn it, I will let you back into Sophie's life. He nodded. He could not speak. He turned and walked down the courthouse steps into the October wind. That was 8 months ago. I sold the brownstone on Marlborough Street. The money went into the Catherine Connolly Educational Trust, a scholarship fund for underprivileged children in Boston. Catherine would have liked that. She always said the best thing you could build was not a building. It was a future for a kid who did not have one. Sophie lives with me now in the triple-decker in Southie. Her room is small. The walls are painted yellow because she said yellow is the color of happy. She goes to a private school in Brookline, the real one this time, and her teacher told me last week that Sophie is the most curious student she has ever had. Every morning, I walk her to the bus stop. She holds my hand. She carries Peanut the elephant in her backpack. She asks me questions about buildings and bridges and how concrete dries. She wants to be an engineer. She is 7. Marcus is alive. He is not in prison. He took a plea deal on the bar violations and the client fund misappropriations. 5 years of probation and full restitution. He lost his license to practice law. He works at a construction site in Quincy now, doing manual labor. The irony is not lost on either of us. Last Saturday, he showed up at my door. He was wearing work boots and a flannel shirt. His hands were rough. His face was sunburned. He looked like my son for the first time in 20 years. He did not ask for money. He did not ask for the apartment back. He held out a small paper bag. "I brought Sophie a cupcake," he said, "from the bakery on Broadway. Can I see her?" I looked at him. I looked at the boots. I looked at the calluses on his palms. I looked at the man who had finally stopped pretending and started working. I stepped aside and opened the door. Sophie saw him from the kitchen table. She jumped off her chair and ran to him. She crashed into his legs the same way she crashes into mine. "Daddy." He knelt down and held her. He cried. Not the manipulative sobs he had used in my office that day. Real tears. The kind that come when a man realizes what he almost lost. I stood in the doorway and watched them. The autumn light came through the window. It was golden. It landed on my granddaughter's hair. It made the whole room glow. I learned something in these 8 months. The hardest thing a father can do is not build an empire or survive a bankruptcy or fight a legal battle. The hardest thing a father can do is let his child fall. Every instinct screams at you to catch them. Every fiber of your heart wants to write the check, make the call, fix the problem. But some problems cannot be fixed with money. Some lessons can only be learned on the ground. I spent 30 years building a safety net so thick that my son never learned how to stand. When I finally pulled it away, he had 2 choices: learn to stand or stay down forever. He is standing now. Barely. But he is standing. And Sophie? Sophie is more than standing. She is flying. If you believe that real love sometimes means letting go, hit the like button and subscribe. And if you have ever had to make a hard choice to protect someone you love, tell me about it in the comments. I read every single one.